Welcome everyone to my mini-series on how to build a setting. In this series I'm not only going to show you how to build a setting for your campaign, but also go into why that is a good idea. With this series you can make every setting you build memorable and intriguing, no matter what system you're running. This is mostly system agnostic, though I might fall back on D&D 5e at some point. That's just the system that I know the best, sorry. These points are entirely for the purpose of example though, and easily transferable to whatever system you happen to be running. As a writer, I can even guarantee that the settings you get with this method are completely suitable for writing novels, even though you should check just how much you've been influenced by TTRPG systems before you get like a massive lawsuit. Enough said, let us begin. Storytelling. On this channel, we are focused on storytelling. Because of this, the very first question you should ask yourself when building a new setting is this: what story do I even want to tell? That is a broad question. To help me, I usually narrow it down via 3 different ways. First, I consider the vibe of the story. We have worked with vibes before on this channel, but they've always been a little difficult to define. If I try, it's something like, what feeling does this give you? This step may be weirdly esoteric, but it cannot be understated. If you have a coherent vibe to think of for all the subsequent tinkering you do on your setting, the entire thing feels cohesive and thematically fitting rather than just a jumbled mess. Examples for vibes could be oppressive, mirthful, plucky, epic, or even mysterious. While it is entirely possible for a setting to maintain many stories with different vibes, in my opinion there should be one coherent through line, a through vibe, if you will. This will help make stories in that setting feel like setting stories, rather than random stories that could take place anywhere. Second, and definitely tied to vibe, is the genre of the story we want to tell. Genre is like vibe if it was marketable, and while marketing is, of course, evil, there should be something that we can learn from it as well. So, if you can think of a vibe and a genre, your setting is already starting to take on a diffuse blob-like shape that has a certain feeling to it. Don't be bothered about what is and isn't a genre. The whole idea is made up anyways, but what's important is to have a guideline. Indiana Jones is not a genre listed in any library, but if you want your setting to feel like comedy Indiana Jones, that's a pretty specific idea already. Stick with that. This also brings us to our third strategy. Find media with a vibe and genre that you picked. Immerse yourself in it. Think with it in mind. You'll quickly find that designing while in a specific mood and mindset lets you do creative things that have that internal cohesion that I spoke of earlier. That way you don't end up with, let's say, a tortured beast imprisoned in the body of a good man and a wisecracking comedy prop in the same scene. How embarrassing that would be, could you imagine? Anyways, now that you have a genre, vibe, and a lot of examples, let's move on to step 2. USP. More marketing. A USP, or unique selling point, is a marketing concept that talks about something a product offers that other products cannot. While we're less strict about it than that, you will want to think about the equivalent to a USP for your setting. Think about it. Every famous setting with great stories has something that makes it unique, or at least immediately identifiable. Star Wars? Lightsabers and the Force. Avatar, elemental bending. X-Men, mutants. Downton Abbey, English gossip. Peaky Blinders, Irish violence. You may have noticed that some of these aren't necessarily unique. That's true, but what your USP needs to do is be conjured in the same breath as the name. They need to become almost synonymous. Sure, Peaky Blinders has English gossip, but Downton Abbey is the English gossip show. Sure, other shows have elemental magic, but Avatar is the elemental magic show. This is often supported by a strong visual identity. Star Wars has spaceships and lightsabers, while Peaky Blinders has that gritty, stylish visual, muddy streets and waistcoats. Also, the Peaky Blind. A setting is most memorable when it has a cohesive and evocative USP and visual identity. And, as we discussed when I started this channel, memorability is what we aim for first. Things can only be good if we can even remember them. As a little exercise, go through your favorite media settings and think of both their USP and visual identity. You'll probably find that both comes to you almost immediately if they're well-crafted settings. You can have good stories despite a bad setting, but you're going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting with the story. Now, how do you get your USP and visual identity? We can narrow some things down. A USP is almost never something nebulous and metaphorical, like the power of friendship or socialism. It's usually something physical that is present in the most important moments of your setting, but also present enough that people think about it throughout the story. So while it can be special, it cannot be something that only happens in secret, that players, readers, or the audience know about after the story is over. A lot of settings' USP is always present, something like the sun, the moon, the air. Maybe your setting is entirely underwater. Hardly original, but definitely a USP, even if the unique is stretching it a little. Or maybe the sun is evil. Maybe there is a malevolent fog everywhere. You get the point. Many of the more basic USPs are something that fundamentally changes the setting in a way that makes it impossible to remember as Fantasy World number 15, because it influences normal life in the setting so drastically that it becomes impossible not to think of the consequences. For example, if I want to go out and buy a loaf of bread, I can't do that if the fog eats me. I have to wait until the fog is gone. That is a good example of a unique selling point. A unique, if you will, variant of the USP is not a setting USP, but a player character USP. While not technically a selling point for the setting, the player characters will only engage in the setting through this USP, which justifies it. You will need to design the setting to be interacted with by this USP. The easiest example here is professions. You decide your setting is going to have the player characters in the role of wizards, secret agents, transformers, or cooks. From here on out, you must consider all your decisions through the eyes of these things. They are USP, just not USPs that immediately seem setting relevant. They are though, because as much as we try, the setting only exists in this context. We are not actually creating a world, just a setting to set a story in. Because of that, these specific USPs are possible. Usually a USP will almost automatically come with a visual identity. Maybe the sun changes colour. Yours is the setting with the RGB lighting. There's fog. It's the fog setting, where everything is gloomy and gothic, with a touch of eldritch horror. If your visual identity is provided like this, it's good practice to go the extra mile and make it more unique to your setting. That way it's not the fog one and, oh, I've read that Stephen King book, but your setting becomes the setting with the red fog, or the fog that makes people make food out of it, or something otherwise unique and interesting. Just remember that the more complex you go, the less striking and immediate your visual identity and USP usually become. You should find a good balance that hints at complexity, but retains simplicity and recognition value. Technology and grit. Technology, grit, and your USP are often combined. I still recommend thinking about it in the way I've laid out. Vibe/genre, USP, and then technology/grit. If something needs changing, please think twice before changing a higher ranked one for a lower ranked, such as changing your USP because it contradicts the fact that you want to play in a cyberpunk world. Bets are, usually whatever your USP was would have yielded a better setting had you allowed it to flower. That's not to say that you can't also make a cyberpunk setting, but that setting will just need a different USP. Why is technology in the very first video, before cosmic forces, player characters, factions, history, all of that stuff? Because I don't necessarily mean technology when I say technology. What I mean by technology and grit is actually a spectrum. This spectrum answers a very important question for the feeling of your setting and the stories therein. How easy is it to get through the day? For the average person in your setting, how easy is it to live? The purpose of this question is to determine the level of advancement your setting in general offers. If there's a specific faction that rejects any form of traditional technology or magical progress, that's fine, but as a whole, on average, this question will impact your setting a lot. If the answer is fairly easy, then you have a setting where things like eat food, find shelter, socialize are things that the average person can fairly reasonably come by. Not without struggle, mind you, but they don't need to eat other people just to survive. Conversely, if the answer is difficult, then you already know some of the conditions in this world. Resources are either gate-kept or rare, transportation isn't widely available, etc. None of these points are necessary, but they will guide you when building your setting. Whenever you invent anything, magic, technology, you can double check where you are on the technology grid spectrum. If whatever you're about to invent breaks the point of the spectrum you want to be at, then you have to readjust, make it rare or difficult, or maybe drop it altogether, maybe it wasn't that good an idea anyways. This method ultimately helps you to keep things cohesive, which is very important for a setting to make any sense at all. After all, you can't immerse yourself in a setting that seems absolutely bonkers, and that seems like it should just fall apart or fix itself without your aid. It does also help when building your setting to think of the literal technology/magic progress. Settings are very different depending on the kind of stuff that is commonly available, even if it might result in the same ease of living. Don't be specific, just give a vague ballpark of the highs and lows of what is possible. For example, a low would be, at the very least in my fantasy world, most people can operate a Mudge elevator, which is of course a magic elevator. And a high would be, for some gifted mages, if they work together, they occasionally bring back the dead through a lot of time and resources. The most amazing feat of technology/magic that can be accomplished without plot MacGuffins. That is your high. 4. The world. Lastly, you need to decide on the qualities of this world that you are going to create. Especially creatives often have difficulty with this last step, because we instantly become aware of the gaping nothing we create. But at some point, we're gonna need to point at a picture and say, that's it. That's what it looks like. And no matter how small your world is, you're never going to fill out everything, have the answers, and know every little bit about it. So you might as well abandon your fears and put down the map now. That way you can work from here on out to fill it, knowing the final shape already. When I say map, I am being mostly literal. At first, you need to decide how expansive or small the setting is. A street can be a setting. A town, a city can most definitely be a setting. A country, a continent, a plane, a planet, a galaxy, they can all be settings. But at some point of enormity, our minds fail to really conjure even an idea of the size. I have no idea how big the Star Wars galaxy is because it just has too many planets. It means nothing to me. And that's not a bad thing. Endless exploration, new planets every installment, that can be a good thing. The scale, in this case, is unfathomably vast. The benefits of large scales like these is that you can always finagle something new in there. A new threat, a new planet, maybe a new country, but if we scale it down more, it gets weird. Yes, mother, a new house just appeared on the street. No, it's not magic, we just never checked that particular corner. Doesn't sound all that plausible. Big settings get the benefit of much stuff. Smaller settings, like countries or cities, can have that as well, but only to a certain extent. A town's sewer system might hold a cult, because of course it does, but it will never hold an entirely new species with a culture, technological advancement, and no contact to the outside world. And if it does, it better explain how the hell that works real well, or I call bullshit. In exchange, small settings get connection and specificity. Small things matter in a way that big things don't. Turns out size does matter. That's not just one bakery out of a million bakeries, that is the bakery where your character's dad liked to sit before he died. You know the owner, and just beyond the bakery is the stairs that you fell down as a child and chipped your tooth. When plot happens to these things, we care in a way we don't when an entire planet gets nuked. Because we don't know the planet. Only when we think of the bakery that got burned to bits, we actually feel something, because that's our bakery. Smaller settings are also contained in a way that larger settings aren't. Saying the police aren't coming because we don't have signal is perfectly fine in a mountain hut in a slasher movie, but there is no way to heal him from his disease. In an infinite galaxy of planets with infinite medicines and doctors, sounds less believable. You can't shut down avenues of inquiry as well, have the players guide their own stories as intuitively if at any point anything can happen, because the setting is so vast. Consequences, as well, those things that are so important to TTRPGs and stories, are vastly more difficult to enforce logically in an expansive setting than a small one. The police might still search for you if you leave the country. They will probably have to give up if you leave the dimension entirely, because Oxymoronics, Demon Lord of the Certain, maybe doesn't quite acknowledge their police jurisdiction. Finally, I want to point out that both of these strengths/weaknesses can be compensated for. You can absolutely have a vast setting that feels meaningful and familiar, or a small setting that offers many opportunities of interaction. You simply have to put in a little more work if you want to capitalize on your setting's strengths while balancing out the weaknesses. While that sounds wild, I think I've talked enough about theory. As always on this channel, theory is only as good as the practical stuff we can make with it. Having said that, let's get practical. Ultima Noche, the birthplace of the universe. One thing that I like to do whenever I create something is name it. By naming it, I give it reality. With a name, it becomes more tangible. That name can change, often I have no idea what I'm doing with it, but usually it turns out nicely. In the spirit of this, I have named the setting Ultima Noche, a pseudo-Latin combination of words carrying the connotation of the last night or final night. I have to admit I've been thinking about this for a little bit, but it by no means diverges from our formula. Speaking of, let's have a look at that. Storytelling. I want this setting to have a darkly epic vibe. Great things are possible here, but these things are so great because we consider the thousands of small sacrifices behind them. Great people, great deeds are great to us in this setting because we know of the smallness of it all. When a building collapses here, we know the loss it brings for the mother who was about to get a loaf of bread for her child, now snuffed out forever. I've been looking into a lot of superhero stuff lately. Marvel, X-Men, Invincible, The Boys, and I really like that genre. And I think I can put a new spin on it. Inspired by something else that I've been obsessed with lately, the video game Warframe, I think I can smash those two together, make them kish. The genre of Ultima Noche, our practical setting, is superheroic sci-fi. And because I feel like those two often come together, I want to introduce one additional element into the mix. My USP and last genre is gothic fiction. Rituals and talismans, bone charms and talking ravens. Mix that with epic superheroes and cosmic sci-fi, and I think we've got something really special. What does this setting have? What USP do I make that really embodies all of this? Here's my pitch. In this setting, a person's soul is palpable energy. Their belief, their faith, their very essence is power. So far, so standard TTRPG, right? Here's where we combine our stuff. This energy, called volition in our setting, is used to power things. Superheroes, spaceships, all the things we usually associate with technology, mutations and freak radiation accidents in their own genre, they are powered by volition. Whether drawn through dark rituals, channeled by playful and mysterious entities, the truth is that volition has made this society cannibalize itself. Each person is unique and valuable. Each person has a price. As the governments struggle to regulate rights and dignity against the invaluable advantage that volition harvest brings, bounty hunters make their bids for volition-rich targets, those with powers and those without, all free for the taking. If you don't get caught. The solar system is in uproar, rights are waved left and right, and vigilante justice is both weirdly encouraged and violently suppressed. All of that just from introducing volition. I'd say that's pretty good as far as a USP goes. For visual identity, we have a few elements that we can combine into a whole. Stars and suns, these more mythical elements important for Gothic fiction, bones and runes etched into the steel of spaceships, superheroes with capes, and familiars. Our combination of genre gives us a coherent visual identity that's instantly recognizable. As long as we avoid stepping on Warhammer 40k's toes, of course. I've never interacted with it, but as I understand it, poorly, that universe has way more religion than mysticism and Gothic fiction. For our level of grit, I chose the middle road. Usually I wouldn't advise this, but I've got a twist. Remember the volition thing I just talked about? The more special you are, the more you're worth to people who want to stuff your soul into their space Ferrari. Our twist is that player characters specifically have a far more difficult time in this setting. This makes it basically impossible to create characters that sit on their butts and do nothing all day. Danger is seeking out our characters specifically, and I think that's a good thing. And lastly, I choose a world shape. Sci-fi and superheroes call for a vast world, and I haven't really done that. I don't want too vast like Star Wars, but I think I wouldn't mind, let's say, one solar system with 7 different planets. What can I say? 7 is a good number. What does this setting look like? Who lives here? How do superheroes work? What's the system? How do we play here? Those are all good questions, some of which I'll be answering in the next video of this mini-series, where I'm delving into cosmic forces. For now, I'll go and scribble down ideas like a mad scientist. Goodbye everyone, and happy storytelling.